Hello everyone and welcome. We are back with another lore tour. I'm counting on this being Xelphatol, because if it's not, I'm going to record this intro every day until it is. How many days have I already done? It's a mystery. So for those of you who don't know how this works, we're going to run through the dungeon, and as we go, basically just talk about all the relevant lore and referential material that I can think to mention. As always, I should start by explaining what we're doing here. This is, of course, the main scenario dungeon for patch 3.4, Soul Surrender. We've been tipped off regarding a planned summoning of Garuda by the Ixal, and have decided that it is imperative that we prevent the summoning before the Warriors of Darkness arrive to cause further chaos and escalation of the Ixal's general desperation. Given that I've already talked quite a lot about the story for patch 3.4, however, I think today we're going to mainly focus on the Ixal themselves. But first, we got these mobs here, particularly Chasm Harpea and Swiftwater Hakulak. I think I'm saying that right, I might not be. Harpies are, of course, bird-woman hybrids of ancient Greek and Roman myth. They have no doubt served to inspire the design of the Ixal themselves. Although the Harpea in Final Fantasy XIV apparently only have the equivalent intelligence of an Opo, according to the Encyclopedia Eorzea. The Hakulak is a Native American monster that disguises its offspring as human children, as bait, that appear to be drowning in order to lure actual human prey into the water and subsequently drown them. All these Ablathian slugs are simple enough, as we are, of course, in the lower eastern reaches of Ablathia's spine, and we are in particular here skirting the canyons above the Veladina River, which serves as a kind of natural border between the Ishraud and Girabunya, as you can see here, thanks to the editing of future Ethys, and hence, of course, we have the Veladina Toad here. So let's talk about Xelphatol. The Ixal were, as we know, banished from the Shroud by the Elementals about 500 years ago for causing some kind of terrible commotion, possibly the first summoning of Garuda, but we don't really know. And they had nowhere to go. There would not have been already claimed territory apart from this hostile corner of Ablathia's spine. So since migrating here, each generation has been born with fewer and fewer feathers until now they're pretty much all gone and they are no longer capable of flight as they once were. And nothing really grows here, so they're forced to rely on hunting and raiding to survive, hence their incursions into the Shroud to log for building materials and scavenge for food. We'll come to their origins in a moment, but first let's have a look at this Nuzal Huelok. Honestly, a few weeks ago, I might not have had much to say about him, but the encyclopedia actually gives us a little section on the naming conventions of the Ixal. So it turns out that Nuzal, being based on the suffix uzal, denotes this as a male, hatched under a northerly wind, which apparently influences his temperament, in this case, a proclivity for cruelty. I suppose it makes sense given that a northerly wind in Eorzea will be sweeping down from the mountains and feel very cold and biting, as opposed to, say, a southerly wind, which the Ixal take to be relatively gentle. His last name, Huelok, is actually a denotation of class or rank within the Ixali caste system. It places him somewhere in the middle, or the Galeborn, as they describe themselves, and it actually echoes their origins. Now, a lot of you will know by now that the Ixalion we find in the fractal continuum of Azazlar are actually the biological ancestors of the Ixal, and that they were originally a kind of chimera created and programmed by the Allagans as a mobile, airborne task force as part of the Allagan military. And they were programmed to follow this very rigid and specific chain of command to ensure discipline and reliability, kind of like the clone troopers of the Republic in the Star Wars prequels. This is the best example I can think of off the top of my head, the best allegory, if you will. Now, even though the Allagans are long gone and the contemporary Ixali don't even have any knowledge of their true origins, this command structure remains embedded in the caste system, as each Ixal feels compelled to perform certain functions and yield to the authority of certain individuals based on their ancestry being of a particular military rank. Thus, the matriarchs are progeny of the commanders, the middle class are various petty officers, and the labor class are the progeny of the lower general rank and file. The logical conclusion of all this, particularly given the comparatively human appearance of Garuda, is that she was historically at the very top of the command chain, and the encyclopedia pretty much confirms this. Garuda was actually the Allagan general of the Ixalian divisions. Excuse me, just taking a breath. So we were seeing some siege gubus there. The implication is clear enough. The Ixali were probably inspired... Let's be real, they were probably inspired by the Great Gubu Wall of Uldar that defended against Imperial and Void-Send incursions in the days leading up to the Calamity, which was made totally canonical in 2.0, by the way. I can't remember who mentions it, but someone in the main scenario quest mentions it in Uldar, somewhere. In any case, I can definitely think of worse monsters for siege weapons. I love the scope of this dungeon here. This is definitely my favorite out of the two, and I'm sure it is everyone else's out of the two introduced in 3.4. And it reminds me of very much of, like, you know, the Mines of Moria or the Goblin Village in The Hobbit. It's very much that same sort of flavor to it. And here, of course, we have some baby boars. So the boars are one of the hardy wild creatures of the canyons of Xelphatol, one of the few, unlike the gubus. Oh, actually, maybe there are gubus in the canyons here. I can't imagine there are, given that there isn't much greenery, but maybe there is. But the boars, in any case, are evidently being raised as livestock, as mounts, as beasts of war, and so on. And this dungeon actually drops one as a minion called the Shaggy Shoat. Okay, we're coming up to Dotoli Silok. Dotoli Silok or Kilok? I think it's probably Kilok. Otoli makes this a female, born under an easterly wind, and therefore naturally hopeful, apparently, as opposed to cruel. Kilok marks her as another of the middle class, but as she is a female in this matriarchal society, she's evidently entitled to all this Garuda regalia, which Ixal, I believe, was not. She's probably then some kind of priestess, and I just love that the Ixali instruments of worshipping and revering the wind it's a bloody fan. It's a giant bloody fan. There's just something very, I don't know, very practical, very prudential about that. It would kind of be like I don't know, an Amaljar riding into war with a box of matches. That's silly. Just me, maybe. Anyway, that's really all I've got on Dotoli. Poor old Dot. This arena, though, is called the Tlachtli. And I have no idea whether I'm saying that right either. Tlachtli. I don't know what exactly that means in Ixali, but Tlachtli was actually a ball game of the Aztecs. Kind of like a mix of football and basketball. Oh, and I mean proper football when I say that, not hand egg. Anyway, we might suppose that this arena, on a normal day, a day that doesn't involve incursions by the warriors of light and darkness, that it serves as some kind of sporting or recreational space. Maybe the fan is actually less a weapon and more like a tennis racket or a cricket bat. Who knows? Maybe Dot just wanted to play a friendly game with us and we took it too far. That'd be pretty typical, wouldn't it, of the good old warrior of light in his golden reindeer onesie with his furry little tail, which is probably actually a butt plug. Anyway, so we're coming out onto the first mountain here. I'm not sure whether this means that it's the first mountain they inhabited, the first proper mountain climbing up the southern approach from the Twelveswood, or just the mountain that the Ixali have decided is their primary one for some reason. But given that it's apparently an important ritual space for the summoning of Garuda, that would certainly make sense. Anyway, the war balloons we can see here are actually loaded up with lumber, well, we could see. We destroyed that one pretty damn fast. Yeah, it was loaded up with the lumber. We'll see the other ones. They'll be loaded up with the lumber as well, I think. So they're either recently returned from a raid in the Shroud, or else they're currently being used in the construction of something up here. When you see just the immense amount of scaffolding that the Ixal use from up here, you can kind of understand why the elementals aren't too fond of them, but you can also understand, in a way, how tough life is for the Ixal, given they have to literally fight for every log and every scrap of food that they need to make this place habitable. It would not be an easy life by any means. They're scumbag elementals, am I right? Anyway, whilst our modern airships are powered by cerulean engines or some other methods of propulsion, I don't know if they're all powered by cerulean engines. The Ixali, on the other hand, their war balloons and dirigibles use air stones, they call them, supposed to be blessed by Garuda, so they might rely on her for their freedom to fly despite the loss of their wings. What they literally are is more likely wind-aspected crystals or stones, which have been further hypercharged by the wind ether absorbed and wielded by the primal Garuda. So once again, lacking the guidance of their historical general Garuda, they continue to depend on a bastardized mythological idol of her to solve any problems that come up. Can't fly no more? Well, rather than thinking inventively or creatively, we'll just ask the general for orders. So their inherent system of class and rank seems to make them even more ready to summon their primal than the other beast tribes. Anyway, I'm sure someone else will mention if I don't, but let's talk about how this Skycaller is wielding a staff that looks a lot like Tupsamati, only with the symbol of Limlayan you can see there, instead of that of Thaliak, which is of course what the Tupsamati has on it. Well, you might notice that actually all of the Ixali fog callers and other staff-wielding casters are using ones with the marks of Limlayan or Ocean. It turns out that whilst the Ixal are pretty handy carpenters, they're not so hot at making magical instruments, so they use stolen and looted staves that have been built to more favorably channel wind-aspected ether, the symbols being an indicator given that Limlayan and Ocean are associated with astral and umbral winds respectively. So that Skycaller's stuff is almost definitely not some Tupsamati-esque Asian gift, as some people might speculate. So finally, we have Tozol Huatotl. Again, I don't know if I'm saying it like that. I'm sure I'm overpronouncing it in some way. This is a male with a hopeful disposition and is of the ruling class, the Sky Scent caste, they call themselves. So although he is not a matriarch, he is certainly a commander of some kind and a high priest. I imagine that for the Ixal, the two roles are very much synonymous, their faith being obviously very much tied up in their caste system and their command structure both. There's not much else to say about him, so let's talk about the Ixali version of their creation myth. They were the sacred guardians of the heavenly domain of the goddess Garuda, known to them as Earthlin, obviously Azazlar, until the evil taint of the land below began to spread to the heavens, and Garuda commanded her divine soldiers to descend and cleanse the land of evil so the heavens might remain free and pure. So they see their whole existence as committed to this sacred duty so that they might someday be allowed to return to Earthlin. Honestly, I suspect that if we showed them what a shitty place that Earthlin itself actually is now, it might go some way to quelling the Ixali aggression, but who knows. I'm still waiting for old Sezul Totolok, I think that's his name, Sezul Totolok of the Cattle 9. I think that's his name, Sezul Totolok. Yeah, that's right. To find his way up here, yeah, I'm waiting for him to find his way up to, not here, Earthlin or Azazlar, I should say. But that's neither here nor there, because look at this, 5%. Am I going to see that limit break bar? I don't think we're going to see that limit break bar. The reckoning is not coming today, Garuda. I'm sorry. Oh, okay, there we go. We're finished with what might go down in history as the fastest and most efficient dungeon run ever featured in a lore tour. So thank you, Side, thank you, Eclair, and thank you to our dear friend Yazoo here. Look, like and subscribe for more lore tours and other content pertinent to the lore of Final Fantasy XIV while I gaze back down over the mists of Xelphatol. Do please leave any questions or comments below. As always, until next time, I'm Ethys. Thanks for watching. Whew, I am out of breath. I think I've earned a nap.